I'm doing a presentation today on how to have the happiest customer in the world, or happiness by reporting would be another title. The idea is that we want to keep in constant communication with our clients. Or as a client, you'd like to have constant communication on what's happening from your agency or developer. So a little bit about me. I'm a two-time Magento master, certified solution specialist on M1. I haven't taken the M2 test. I was the first forum moderator that Magento didn't pay, and I hired or helped recruit Sherry. I like to tweet. I like to run and have selfies, and this was last year's Chicago Marathon. I actually ended up taking 19 pictures during the race. And I was happy here, and then I got really depressed, and at the end I was happy again. So it all worked out. Okay, so why do I advocate so much reporting? Let's look at a client, and we'll kind of walk through it. So we have a client, Kim. Kim is a client, has a product that he wants to sell, and he has a very strong knowledge of this product. He uses this product all the time. He's very excited about getting his product launched. He's sometimes excited about launching other things. Just to let you know that this is a very good time for this topic. So he does tend to launch things quickly. We're not quite sure what Kim's expectations are around this. I mean, we've had a meeting, we've talked, but as an agency, we're not sure of his expectations, and he is not really sure what to expect from us. We know that he has a plan in mind, and so our goal as the provider is to get our plan synced. And by the way, he has nuclear weapons, so we need to make sure that our plan is good for him. So, as an agency, what do we not do well? Or what can we not do well that's going to cause things to go off the tracks? The first one would be to set a precedent that causes something in the project to the client to expect something. So if we weren't to tell the client that we have an issue or we've spent a lot of extra time doing something, and at the very end of the project we tell the client, oh, by the way, we took an extra 4,000 hours and it's going to be $2.3 million. The client is most likely not going to be very happy about that. Sometimes we can let the client go on autopilot, which means everything starts, and then at the end, we just hope it's going to get to the right place in the end. If we say yes to everything as an agency or as a developer, and we don't talk about the ramifications of that yes. So if we think of it as a sprint or as an agile style project, and if we said yes to everything, we could never shove everything back into that backlog because there wouldn't be enough time to finish it. Back to the autopilot, if we do too many things that are out of scope and we don't talk to the client about what's in or out of scope, pretty soon everything is in scope because we haven't set a precedent of out of scope. The idea of this is to create a level of trust with the client so that we can all have an area that we can have that's safe, that we can talk about things that are going to change within a project. So if you were to do a fixed bid project, the idea would be that we all agree on everything up front and nothing is going to change. But we all know that things are going to change during the project. So what we want to do is talk about those things that change and then agree on them at that time, so at the end we don't have a lot of surprises. Which, at the very end, we send a big bill without talking about any of those changes. So this part is what, as an agency or developer, is important, and we'll have a next slide that we're going to kind of highlight those same things. And then this part, if we do too many things that are in and out of scope without talking to them, I'm not saying that as a developer or as an agency, we wouldn't do things that are out of scope to try to keep things on track or create some kind of trust with the client, but we should talk about them. Okay, so when client and agency partner, we have a good sync up. So client and agency sync up through active communication. And what I'm going to demonstrate later on is by active communication, sometimes I demand our project managers to communicate on a daily basis. I would like this communication to take no more than 5 minutes, and it's just going to have really good information that's going to help everybody understand where we are in a project. After we've done this, we can make sure that we're going back and verbally talking about what we've done in this project on at least a weekly basis. If the client asks for many things during the project, then we are going to talk about how those things hurt or help the project, and what more importantly, what that timeline means to getting that project live. When we do many things in and out of scope, we are going to talk to the client, we are going to tell them immediately, and then we can negotiate how those things are going to happen, and if there's a delay within those things, it's best to tell the client that there's a delay now, rather than at the end when they're expecting it, to tell them that there's a delay. So this was that first point. We are going to we're going to let them ask, but we are going to then tell them or help them understand what those things mean. And then when they do many things, or when we do, I should say, when as a developer too many things are done out of scope, we want to at least report on that time so everybody understands what that means. So the most important part is we're compressing the amount of time between communications. If you think about when is it as an agency or as a merchant, when is it as a merchant that you have not been happy with the developer or development company that you're using? It's when you have a surprise or something isn't going right. If something is brought up and 5 minutes later you're told this is how it's going to happen, now, well, number one, we've put everything out on the table and we can negotiate or talk about what does that mean in our project. And number two, then the client or the agency are going to have a better idea of when things happen, and we can understand how long those things are going to take. So to get this, we can make some rules, and we should set these rules based on criteria within this status report. So some of those rules would maybe around, are we waiting for a third party to deliver some information? Are we waiting for data to come? Are we waiting for a catalog to get loaded? Are we waiting for assets for images? There's many things that are going to cause roadblocks. And then we're going to send these reports based on these rules. So when I say a status report and I say it's a daily report, it doesn't have to go out daily. If we send out the exact same report every day, people are going to stop reading it. So we want them to be meaningful. And then at least, well, every time you speak to the client on the phone, I encourage our staff to say, how was this going, or how was your last week? Give me a score of 1 through 5. That score then can be measured, and now we can start tracking. So just at the end of the project, if everybody's happy, or if in the middle of the project suddenly, say you have an in-house developer at a company, and that developer suddenly says, everything is going horrible. Well, now we can go back and at least we can get a track record of how we've done, and we can go back to them and say, well, which part, when did horrible start? And we can help to have a conversation around, let's get us back from horrible to doing really well. All right, so what can happen? So here's an example of Kim's project. Now, this is a simple burn down chart. We have 400 hours of work, and so let's just say we have 16 weeks to do it. So at the end, we're hopefully going to get all the way down to 0. All right. So here we go. The red line is our original line. The blue line is the anticipated work that the client has given us, and this yellow line is the work that we've added. So we see a little blip in our graph. What this means, if we continue on our current path, we're never going to finish on time, and we may go back to the nuclear thing that Kim brought up earlier in the first meeting, which we don't want. So, if we are, best cases, we'd be presenting the client with some kind of visual so they don't have to read through reams of material and they can understand where we are at any one time. All right, so if things are going wrong and we allow these items to continue to be pushed into our backlog, we are never going to make it. So if this is like Agile 101, if you're not familiar with the Agile process, what it means is that we're going to put a bunch of things in a backlog, and out of all those things that we're doing, we have the work and the time, and at the end we're going to get down to 0. Now if we don't add more developers, then we can't continue at the same pace. It's a visual to allow everybody to understand what's happening. Okay, so I guess the first option for us is to run, and I always want to put a shameless plug in running in my slide deck, and this is from Magento Imagine, so this is my shameless plug for our big damn run in next year's Imagine, and that's Mark Lavelle, by the way. So that's my shameless plug on the CEO of Magento presentation. All right, the other idea is that we can invent time. And I understand that in the future, somebody's going to come back and tell us that they've invented time, or at least time travel, in the near future. This is a joke slide, which generally this is how my joke slides go down. All right, so as an overview, a story of a project, projects are filled with real things that need to happen. We can't anticipate that everything is going to happen. We can, though, plan for the unplannable. And how do we do that? We'll walk through some of that. We can help to plan by reporting often. So if something comes up that's not planned, the only way to do it at the time that it comes up is to plan it. And then after we report often, let's report some more. And trust me, we have a staff of like 49 people and 7 project managers, and every day they say, why do I have to send this report? They don't read it anyways. And I say the report is for us. We'll talk about that later too. And then we're going to send this report. The key here is all this reporting is going to make us a story of what's happened. And that story then can be brought back, ideally at the end of a project. We could have a really nice big book that is summarized and can tell us everything that's happened. So from our side, we can do this helps in our sprint retrospect enormously. We can find out what went wrong, what went right, what can we do better next time. From the client's point of view, they can see, oh, yeah, I can see where some of these things, I can see where we did add a lot, or when the digital agency didn't give us all those assets the day before the site launch, I can see why we did actually have to take an extra week. The reports should have real data, but take no more than 5 minutes to complete. So this is just a daily status report. So this is basically out of our, whatever project management system you're using, Jira or whatever, we're going to get that information we want, we're going to compile it, and we're going to try to give that to a client on a daily basis. This is my favorite quote. There are known knowns. These are the things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know. There are also unknown unknowns. These are the things we don't know we don't know. And this is a typical software project. This happens every single time. Okay, so once we've gotten everything back on track, we can now either negotiate for time or we can negotiate for resources, and we can get to the end. And here you can see at this point we've just told the client, hey, if we're going to launch, then we're going to have to stop adding work to the backlog. And the best way to do that is to create some kind of plan up front that says we want a minimal viable product. let's get your site launched as soon as possible. And that'll get us to the point in which, okay, we've made it past phase 1, let's call all this extra work phase 2. All right, so we'll go over some examples of reporting. So a status report, the status report is for the customer to review, but more importantly, it's for us to use internally to determine where, if something isn't quite right, how can we track that back to figure out where did we go wrong and how can we use this data to make our work better next time. In the development world, it would be the equivalent of debugging. We've done all this work, and then let's go back and QA it to find out, hey, this did work, didn't work, and if it didn't work, let's figure out why. Report should communicate something meaningful. So I have project managers that simply create a list of tickets and send it to the client. And I say, no, we don't need a list of tickets because they can look at the list of tickets in Jira. Let's do features and then let's put some meaningful information around those features to determine how are those features doing in our project. And if there's something in that feature that's causing more of a headache, let's highlight that. Let's bring those things up front that are causing more of these headaches, and let's talk about that. This report should come out very quickly. If we are using some kind of a project management system that's collecting data, let's make sure we're collecting the data and that's scripted to make it happen quick. If we can launch and deploy a Magento site in 1.5 minutes, we can certainly pull stuff out of Jira in 10 minutes. So this is important because the report should be able to communicate back to us something that we've missed. So we always, this is where this either daily or weekly communication with the client to talk about, hey, how are we doing here and did we miss anything? So one way of accomplishing this would be to have the client send you back something. If they feel something is missing, we could use something like Zendesk to come back with a ticket, or they can just submit a ticket back to Jira. But the important part is that this is a two-way street. We want the client to help us to make the project better. So having them come back to us with something that we missed is important. And then, of course, we need to have rules. So the rules are so that we don't just send the report automated over and over again. We create some rules. The rules tell us when the report goes. Back to this one. The other thing about this, the way for the client to give us feedback. Many times in a project there is a gap in this communication. So having everybody tell, or having a place where we can all talk about some of these missed things, then it goes back to how we want to compress that communication so there is less time for people to get not so happy. All right, so the data points this is just an example of some data points that we would use for a report. And we use just a Google Sheet at the moment for a daily report. We would just put features, timeline, time left, time added. Like this timeline, the time left, time added can be easily graphed as well. Roadblocks are really important, and putting a date on roadblocks are important. I saw a report that had March as a roadblock, and at some point, if it's 6 months, is it really a roadblock or a risk? Open questions, so we leave open questions on a new tab, and those questions are resolved ongoing with the date that they were submitted. The risks are very important, and we add third parties for risks. We, as Magento, we work a lot with other agencies, so we work with agencies in Europe and agencies in America. A risk would be an open item that anybody can add. So us as a partner working with another agency, we want to let everybody know if there's a delay because some other feature may be hinging on that. Or if you're using Magento Order Management, a risk could be that some feature isn't available yet and the team in Barcelona is working on it. This client health survey is what I talked about getting a score. So on a weekly basis, we'd have a talk with the client, and we'd ask the client, can you give me a feedback of 1 through 5? And then that gives us a good track record of, hey, did you give us a 1? Great, well next week we're going to try to go for a 5. And if we're continually getting 1s, then we should really just have a deep-hearted meeting to find out, hey, how do we get above a 1? And then we also communicate closed issues. I was in a meeting with a client who said, all we're doing is solving it, all we're doing is having issues in every report. And I said, if you look at the closed issues tab, you'll see that there's new issues coming up, but they're never there more than a week. So if as a high level decision maker in a company, you just see that there's 7 open issues, but you don't realize that there's a lot, those are just new ones coming in and old ones getting solved. You can go back and document what have we done to give some kind of history. All right, so the summary report. So the summary report is just a compilation. And this compilation I would visualize as this big thing of graphs, like a New Relic. So you can see some really cool graphs, and it'd be great if they spun, but that only happens in Harry Potter on their paper stuff. So the report should get discussed. At some point, we should discuss it with decision makers at the company. Take time to work out issues and roadblocks. This should be done live so everybody can see what some of those things are. We should talk about what is working and not working. This is where we're going to ask for that score. We're going to review the previous score from the week before with the client and talk about in real time what are we doing well and what aren't we doing well. And then again, everybody likes pretty looking reports and nobody likes spreadsheets. So this is my ideal situation for a CEO. A CEO wants to look at something, it should have like 7 bullet points or something like that with a lot of pretty graphs. It's just meant to have the leadership get a clear picture of the state of the project. It should be easy to read. Highlights are wins. So this is really important. If you never tell the client that, hey, we're actually doing some things well, then those things that we've done not so well, which are always highlighted because they're issues, those not so well things are always going to overwhelm the things that are never talked about. And rarely, everybody expects, like your car goes down the road. Nobody says, hey, my car made it down the road. But if you had a British car, and no offense to British people, an older British car, we all know that those cars run on smoke, and when the smoke comes out of the wires, you know there's a problem. Again, that was a poor attempt at a joke. I apologize to anybody that's English. So we're going to highlight our wins. We're going to use lots of pretty graphs. This is again for our CEO, and we should not overwhelm them with too much communication, but we should find out, or at least make sure they're seeing it. Okay, so billing report. This is another report that's going to help us to bridge the gap between accounting, project management, and then the leadership on the client side. Most of the time, either billing is done by ticket or by feature. So we want to be able to tie any bill back to something that happened. So it's more objective rather than subjective. We want to be able to easily and quickly reconcile the hours. And we want to do this is the same as a change order. We want to be able to go back and say, here's where those hours were generated. We want our tickets to align with their statement of work or a change order, or another way of justifying hours. So many times something will come up and they'll say, can we just get this done today? Well, if there's no ticket and we've just done it, then it's hard for somebody to remember, oh, this was for XYZ, so let's at least put that on there. And then we want to be firm, but we also want to be flexible. We don't want 10 hours to ruin a 1,000-hour project. So sometimes, yeah, we'll give you those 10 hours. Okay, so change reports, I can't stress how important change reports are. I can't stress that. Let's all talk about if there's a change. In a fixed bid, there's never a change report. Or there's a change report in a fixed bid, but now suddenly it's not quite a fixed bid, it's a new bid. We want to put everything, I'm always going to stress that everything should be objective, which means we can point back to some fact. The more things that we have subjective, the harder it is to justify whatever we're doing or asking for. So don't allow developers or clients, and I'm going to stress developers. There's many times where a developer just goes down a ticket and suddenly this feature is now, it was add to cart, and suddenly now the developer is working on product updates, and somehow the developer has figured out or been asked to do something, and they've, instead of just starting a new ticket, they push something into the same ticket, and now it's more confusing for the client when they get a change order on that ticket. And then this is back to being firm, but we want to negotiate. So pick your battles on how long something, or what you're going to build and what you're not going to build. The important part here is to demonstrate to the client that, hey, we did take this time. And we try to be as transparent as possible. So if something did take 150 hours, it's because we took the extra time to learn it, or we just plain misquoted it, and it took us that long, even if we're charging them for 100 hours. And then we don't want any CR to be a blocker. We don't want a CR to be a blocker on the entire project. And again, just be clear that if something does take longer and we're not going to bill the person for it, that we can't invent time yet. That whatever we're going to do is still going to take time, so it's not going to happen as soon as everybody wants. All right, so how much time do I have? Oh, geez. All right, well, I have some deployment reports. I'm going to quickly go through this since I took too much time. So I'm an advocate of also documenting our deployments, and I say that because we had a client that wanted deployments, but then regardless of whether it was tested or not, they wanted to deploy it, and it wasn't. Pick the right delivery mechanism, communicate all risks before the development, try to group as many features into deployment as possible. This is just like deployment 101. If you see risk in deployment, the client is insisting on deployment, have the client sign off. And this is well, we have an example of getting code from a third party. The client wanted that code live. They said skip UAT. The code broke the site. So if that's what's got to happen, then we need to have everybody understand. And then I think reporting downtime for performance versus other factors are also very important. Get developers used to deployments. All right, sorry about that last slide. Kind of went through it. Questions? Anybody? Going once? Twice? All right, thank you.